I'm not coming back. I've met someone better. Your stuff is in storage." That was the entire message. No apology, no explanation. Just a screenshot of a bank transfer $118,000, pulled from our joint savings and dumped into her personal account. "My name is Leonard Kessler. I'm 54 years old." And I was standing in the kitchen of our Des Moines condo, staring at that message on my phone. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday. Dana, my wife of 15 years, was supposed to be on the 4th day of a girls' trip to Palm Springs. Instead, she was gone. And so was our money. I set the phone down next to my coffee. I didn't throw it, didn't scream, didn't panic. I just stood there, quiet. Because somehow, I wasn't surprised. For months, the signs had been there. The trips that started as weekends and stretched into full weeks. New dresses and shoes she never wore around me. Whispered phone calls that died the moment I walked into a room. I noticed everything. I'm a forensic accountant. Noticing details, discrepancies is literally my job. But in my own home, in my own life, I ignored them. Maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe it was marrying someone who thought spreadsheets and financial audits were boring. Dana never cared to understand what I did for a living. "As long as you make enough for us to live comfortably," she'd say with a smile. That was her baseline. Comfort, not connection. I walked over to my laptop and opened an email account Dana didn't know about. I'd set it up years ago just in case. 3 security alerts from my private bank system were sitting there. Someone had tried to change login credentials on accounts Dana had no idea even existed. She was being thorough. I had to give her that. I picked up my phone and typed 2 words in reply. "Good luck." Then I dialed my brother. "Jason, you remember that contingency plan we talked about 5 years ago?" I asked when he answered. Jason didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You serious?" She just made her move. There was no hesitation after that. "All right, I'll start my end." I hung up and looked around the condo at the walls. We'd painted together, the kitchen she swore she wanted to remodel. The wedding photo still hanging above the mantel. Funny. It was the only picture in the place that still had both of us in it. I should have noticed that too. I met Dana Bowman at a University of Iowa alumni mixer. I was 38, recently divorced from a short first marriage that fizzled out before it even really began. Dana was 34, full of ambition, confidence, and energy that made every room feel brighter. She was magnetic and completely uninterested in my profession. She didn't fake it. Didn't ask questions she didn't care about. "I don't need the details," she'd say, waving her hand with a laugh. "Just make sure we're taken care of." We got married a year later. I paid for her yoga studio with money from my savings, helped her register the business, build the website, set up the PAS system, none of which she acknowledged. When she wanted a bigger house, I made it happen. Luxury cars. Weekend getaways to network with her wellness community. I didn't blink. She said I was dependable, steady, but somewhere along the way, she stopped saying much of anything. I still remember what my father said to me once, back when he was helping me fix the back deck. "She spends a lot of your money, son," he said as he lined up a nail. "Just make sure she values what you do to earn it." At the time, I shrugged it off, but it stuck. 6 years into the marriage, I quietly began protecting myself. Not out of paranoia, out of realism. I created 2 LLCs, moved some assets into trusts, invested in crypto, kept some international funds under a corporate veil. Nothing illegal. Just smart. Dana knew about our joint checking and savings, but that was it. She was too busy building her online persona, fitness tips, green smoothies, and inspirational quotes. Her Instagram blew up. Suddenly, she had a wellness community. They traveled, took pictures in matching yoga gear on beaches and mountaintops. "You wouldn't enjoy it," she said once. "It's all yoga talk and juice cleanses." Last Christmas, she forgot my birthday. Bought me a watch the next day when I reminded her. "I've been so busy with the studio expansion," she said. I accepted the watch. Then that night, I finalized the paperwork on the contingency plan Jason and I had mapped out years before. Because somewhere inside, I already knew. The morning after Dana's text, I made coffee like usual. Muscle memory. Then I sat at my desk and logged into the financial management system I'd built for my private clients' custom tools. Real-time ledger tracking, encrypted backups. It wasn't just a program. It was my fortress. With a few keystrokes, I triggered the contingency protocol. Step 1. Freeze all joint accounts, credit cards, and any access she had to shared assets. Step 2. Flag the $118,000 transfer as unauthorized, and escalate the fraud claim using my professional contacts. Step 3. Compile and forward all documentation to my attorney, screenshots, email headers, financial statements. I gave her the green light to file for divorce immediately. Then I called my mum. "Dana left me," I said, "took the money, moved my stuff out while she was on a so-called vacation." My mum didn't gasp, didn't cry. She was quiet. "I'm sorry, Leonard," she said after a pause, "but I can't say I'm surprised." "What are you going to do?" "What I've been preparing to do for years," I said. "Protect what's mine." An hour later, Dana called. I declined. Then came 10 more calls, then a text. "What the hell did you do? The money's gone and my cards don't work." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the storage facility she mentioned in her breakup message, used the gate code she'd provided. Inside, I found 2 boxes labeled Leonard and my old laptop. Was it? No photos, no books, nothing from my dad. Not even the watch she'd bought me, and that more than the text. More than the money is when something in me hardened. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was erasure. 15 years of my life tossed into 2 cardboard boxes. I left the storage facility with the boxes in my trunk and no real destination in mind. I didn't want to go back to the condo. That place didn't feel like home anymore. So, I pulled into a quiet coffee shop I used to go to when I needed to clear my head during casework. Inside, I ordered black coffee and took a seat near the window. The world outside kept moving. People smiled, checked their phones, laughed like it was just another Friday. I opened my laptop and accessed databases only available to licensed financial investigators. I wasn't looking for comfort or closure. I was looking for Trey Harmon, so-called someone better. Dana had been tagging him for months: yoga retreats, smoothie bowls, cryptic captions about alignment. I didn't need to be a detective to see what was going on, but I needed to know what I was really up against. And what I found confirmed everything I suspected and more. Trey Harmon's business was a flaming wreck hidden behind filters and motivational posts. 3 business credit cards maxed out. A luxury lease on a gym he couldn't afford. Equipment rentals behind on payments. A handful of lawsuits for unpaid vendor invoices. And worst of all, Dana had already co-signed on a car loan for him 2 months ago, so while I'd been budgeting for retirement, she'd been subsidizing a fitness fantasy. I closed my laptop slowly and sat there for a moment, sipping lukewarm coffee. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was clear. and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt in control again. I booked a room at a hotel across town. No need to return to a home that had already been emptied. I needed space. Not just physically, but emotionally. Monday morning, I walked into my office like nothing had happened. My assistant, Valerie, looked up from her desk, eyebrows rising in surprise. "Leonard, I thought you'd be out today." I nodded toward my office. "I've got work to do." She hesitated. "Dana called here 3 times. I stopped. She said there was a misunderstanding with the bank." She sounded frantic. "If she calls again, tell her to contact my attorney." By noon, Valerie gave a small nod. She didn't ask questions. That's why she was the best. But Dana didn't stop at phone calls. By lunchtime, the receptionist buzzed me. "Your wife is here," she said, voice strained. "She says it's urgent." Of course she did. I sighed and walked down to the lobby. Dana stood there, head high, designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She wore yoga gear, perfectly coordinated from mat bag to sneakers. She smiled when she saw me, the same smile she'd used for 15 years whenever she wanted something. "Leonard," she said brightly, loud enough for the whole waiting area to hear, "there's been a huge misunderstanding. The bank froze everything. All our accounts, not a misunderstanding," I said quietly. "You transferred money without authorization. The bank flagged it as potential fraud." Her smile twitched. "It was a joint account. I'm your wife. You were my wife," I corrected. "Now, you're my soon-to-be ex-wife, the one who emptied our savings and sent me a breakup text from Palm Springs." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "You can't do this. I already put a deposit down on a new apartment. I've made commitments. Trey and I know all about Trey," I cut in. "And the commitments you made?" Her face drained of color. "You're investigating me." "No, I'm protecting myself. From fraud. I'll fight this," she snapped, arms crossing. "I deserve half of everything." I looked her in the eyes, voice even. "Half of what's in those joint accounts?" "Sure, but you seem to think that's all there is." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "You'll find out during discovery." I turned and walked away. That afternoon, I received an email from Dana's freshly hired attorney, bold, aggressive, demanding immediate access to all financial records, accusing me of hiding assets, threatening to expose irregularities in my accounting practice. I read it once and shook my head. Amateur.empty. Threats from someone who had no idea what they were stepping into. I forwarded the email to my attorney, with a single line, "Proceed as planned." By evening, Dana had begun the next phase. Reputation warfare. My phone buzzed with texts from mutual friends. "What's going on between you and Dana? She says you're being vindictive. She told us you froze everything out of spite. Is it true you're trying to bankrupt her?" Not one of them asked where Dana had been for the last week. Not one asked about the $118,000 she stole, or the boxes she left me with, or the boyfriend she'd been funding behind my back. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I went to the gym, not Dana's sleek studio. Not Trey's flashy influencer-fueled fitness club. No, I went to the small community center I'd trained at 4 years, where no one cared about Instagram followers or Lululemon leggings. I lifted weights until my arms trembled and sweat stung my eyes. I wasn't trying to look strong. I was reclaiming something. That night, I slept better than I had in months. 3 days later, my attorney called. "We found something interesting," she said, her tone clipped, professional. "Dana's been siphoning money from your joint account. For over a year." My jaw tightened. "How much?" "Almost $80,000 total. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers. Some to her personal savings, but most of it went to a business LLC registered to Trey Harmon. She paused. Leonard Shu's been funding his business with your money. I closed my eyes. Add financial infidelity to the filing. Yes, she said. It strengthens the case. Significantly, I thanked her and ended the call. I wasn't shocked, but it still hurt. Not because of the money or even the betrayal. Because it had been planned. Planned for months. Planned while we shared dinners, holidays, laughs. While I smiled through forgotten birthdays and empty conversations, while she was lying next to me in bed. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. Back off. Dana deserves better. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. No name, but I didn't need one. Trey Harmon had just stepped into the ring. The message from Trey didn't scare me. It told me exactly what I needed to know. He was feeling the pressure. And that meant I was getting close. The next morning, I drove to my brother Jason's house. Jason's background is in digital security. He's done consulting for law firms, hospitals, even small government agencies. We've collaborated on a few fraud cases over the years, me handling the money trails, him tracking the digital footprints. But this was different. This was personal. I need everything you can find on Harmon Fitness LLC, I told him as soon as he opened the door. Jason raised an eyebrow. Legal channels only. Right. I nodded. We're just connecting public dots. Faster than most people know how. He waved me inside, already logging into his systems. Coffee's fresh. Let's dig in. 3 hours later, we had a full digital dossier. Trey Harmon wasn't just a broke entrepreneur with an overfiltered Instagram. He was drowning. His gym equipment. Leased, not owned. The lease was past due. Credit cards. 3 maxed out, with minimum payments missed. His so-called expansion, funded through short-term, high-interest loans from sketchy lenders. But there was more. Something Dana couldn't have known, unless she was a whole lot smarter than I gave her credit for. Jason pulled up a PDF. Look at this. 4 months ago, Harmon applied for a small business loan, $175,000. I leaned in. He used gym equipment as collateral. Jason continued, and got a better rate by applying as a married couple. What? I said. Scroll down. I did. Dana's signature was right there. Co-signer on the loan, but not just as a business partner, as a spouse. Jason tapped the screen. It says right there, joint liability, based on marital assets. I stared at it, the words swimming for a moment. She used my name, I said slowly. Put me on the hook for this. Without telling me, Jason nodded. And that's not the only thing. There's a car lease, commercial space rental, and 3 credit cards, all with her as the cause, all of them secured using your combined financial profile. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, kids were laughing in a nearby yard. A sprinkler twirled across a perfect green lawn. Innocence. She has no idea what she's done, I muttered. Jason didn't respond, and neither does he. The next morning, I met with my attorney. I laid everything on the table: Trey's debt, the fraudulent loan, the misuse of marital status. I want to move fast, I told her, before they realize what's coming. She read through the documents silently, then looked up and nodded. We'll file for emergency asset protection. Today, will that cover the loan? She nodded again. If the loan was signed under false pretenses and without your consent, we can freeze joint assets until the divorce is finalized. The loan fraud alone is enough to trigger action. That afternoon, I drove to Harmon Fitness. The gym was exactly what I expected: sleek, expensive, oversaturated with branding and fake motivation. Quotes painted on the walls, selfies in every mirror. Trey's face plastered next to every squat rack. I walked through the front doors and was hit with the smell of artificial citrus and overpriced protein shakes. Most of the people inside looked more interested in taking photos than working out. Then I saw him. Trey Harmon. Taller than he looked online. Tan to perfect. Teeth to white. Confidence like cologne. Thick and clawing. He saw me almost immediately and walked over with a practiced smile and hand outstretched. "You must be Leonard," he said smoothly. "Dana's mentioned you." "I'm sure she has," I said, not taking his hand. "We need to talk. Privately." His smile slipped just a bit, but he nodded and led me to a glass-walled office near the back. Once we were inside, he closed the door. "What can I do for you?" he asked, still pretending this was casual. I placed a manila folder on his desk. "These are financial documents," I said. "Every loan, credit card, lease, anything, co-signed with Dana. All using my marital assets as collateral." He opened the folder and began flipping through the papers. His face started to change with every page. "I don't understand," he said. "These are all legitimate business agreements between me and Dana." "Maybe," I replied. "But they were approved based on marital income. My income, my assets, and now Dana and I are divorcing. Which means all those financial guarantees, they're invalid." He looked up at me, eyes hardening. "She said you were wealthy. That money wasn't an issue for you." "It never was about money," I said. "It was about trust. And you're standing in the middle of a massive breach of it." He pushed the folder aside, jaw tightening. "So what do you want?" "Nothing," I said calmly. "I'm not suing you. I'm not threatening you. I just wanted you to know what's coming. The banks will be calling those loans due soon." He stared at me for a long moment. "You're trying to destroy me to get back at her." "No," I said, already rising. "I'm just protecting myself. You were never part of the plan. You're just the collateral." I walked to the door but stopped. "One more thing," I said without turning. "When Dana moved out, she took some things that belonged to me. Sentimental things, photos, my dad's watch. I'd like them back." He didn't say anything, just watched me. Then I walked out. The next day, a courier dropped off a box at my hotel. Inside were the missing photos, my dad's watch, and a few other small items. No note, no message. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the watch in my hand for a long time. Not out of sadness, not out of nostalgia, just recognition. That phase of my life, 15 years of marriage, loyalty, silence, was officially closed. That afternoon, my attorney called. "The emergency asset protection has been approved," she said. "All shared assets are frozen until the divorce is resolved. Any attempt to access them will be flagged immediately." "Thank you," I said. I hung up and logged into my financial dashboard. 17 access attempts on the frozen account in the past 24 hours. All from Dana. She'd also tried to open a new credit line, using the house as collateral. Denied. My phone buzzed. Her name. Again. This time, I answered. "What have you done?" Dana's voice was sharp, frantic. "The bank called in Trey's loans, all of them. They're seizing the equipment tomorrow." I leaned back in my chair, let the silence linger. "That's unfortunate," I said, flatly. "You're doing this to hurt me," she snapped. "You're destroying him just to get back at me." "I'm not doing anything to him," I said, my tone even. "I'm protecting myself. You used our marriage, my assets to secure loans without my consent. That's fraud, Dana. It has consequences. We can work this out, she said, suddenly softening. Come home, we'll talk. I made a mistake, but this doesn't have to ruin everything. And there it was. That switch she'd always flipped when charm was more effective than rage. 15 years of marriage, I said slowly, and you still think I'm that easy to manipulate? She said nothing. There's nothing to work out, I continued. The divorce is proceeding. The fraud investigation is active. And Trey about to learn the importance of due diligence. I hung up and blocked her number. For the first time in months, I slept without waking in the middle of the night. 3 weeks later, I sat in a beige conference room across from Dana and her attorney for court-ordered mediation. She looked different. The designer outfit was there, sure, and her makeup was flawless, but the exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. The strain was visible in the way she gripped her pen, in how often she glanced at her attorney before speaking. Her lawyer started. First, my client is willing to be reasonable, he said carefully, given the aggressive tactics that have been taken so far. My attorney smiled, polite but firm. That's good, she said, because there's been a development. She slid a thick folder across the table. The cover page bore the logo of one of the nation's largest banks. The fraud investigation is complete, she said. The bank has concluded that Ms. Bowman forged my client's signature on multiple loan applications. She used marital assets as collateral without his knowledge or consent. Dana's attorney went pale. He opened the folder and scanned the contents. We'll need time to review this, he murmured. Of course, my attorney said, but you should know, the bank has already referred the matter to the district attorney. Dana's head snapped. Up criminal charges, she whispered. Leonard, you can't be serious. I didn't file the charges, I said quietly. The bank did. That's what happens when you commit loan fraud. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently in her ear. She shook her head in disbelief. If Ms. Bowman is willing to sign our proposed settlement agreement today, my attorney continued smoothly, Mr. Kessler is prepared to submit a statement to the bank, one that could mitigate the criminal implications. Dana blinked. He will also agree not to press charges for the theft of personal property, or the unauthorized transfer of funds from the joint account. Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen. The settlement was more than fair. Generous, even. She kept her yoga studio, one of the few ventures she'd managed without my help. She kept her car, her clothes, her personal belongings, but she forfeited alimony, and she assumed full responsibility for any debts incurred in my name. No alimony, she asked quietly. I shook my head. You made enough moves behind my back. You can make a few payments in front of it now. Her eyes darted to her attorney, but he gave a small nod. A moment later, she signed. Just like that, it was done. As we left the building, she caught my arm. I never thought you'd fight back like this, she said. You always just went along. That was my mistake, I replied. And everything that's happened was yours. I walked away. I didn't look back. A month later, I moved out of the hotel. I didn't want the old house, not anymore. It was filled with memories that had rotted from the inside. So I bought a modest craftsman home just outside downtown Des Moines. Nothing fancy, just clean lines, real wood floors, and a backyard big enough to matter. The kind of house you fix with your hands. Something to keep me grounded. I heard through mutual friends that Dana had moved to Colorado. Her Instagram was back to life now, filled with photos of mountain trails, smoothie bowls, and quotes about transformation. Trey's gym, sold, swallowed by a national fitness chain. He'd relocated to Miami to expand his brand. Neither of them mentioned what had happened. People rarely advertise their failures. One Saturday, Jason came by to help me install kitchen cabinets. He handed me the tape measure and leaned against the counter. "Heard anything from Dana?" "No," I said, "and I don't expect to." He nodded. "You know, you could have gone further. The fraud alone would have sunk her. You could have buried both of them." I shrugged. What would be the point? They're no longer my problem. We worked in silence for a while. Just the sounds of the drill, wood shifting, cabinets locking into place, rhythmic. Clean. Eventually I spoke. "I'm thinking of heading up north for a bit. Maybe hit the cabin in Minnesota. Do some fishing." Jason looked up, surprised. "You haven't been up there since Dad passed." "Exactly," I said. "It's time." That night, after he left, I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon. The neighborhood was quiet, with the occasional bark of a dog or laughter of children echoing down the street. This place didn't feel like a performance. It felt real. I thought about the last 15 years. How I'd tried so hard to make someone happy who never valued the effort. How I'd ignored signs that should have been sirens. How I'd stayed quiet while someone else wrote the story of my life. But not anymore, because when the moment came, when the house of cards fell, I'd been ready. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt free. The next morning, I called my office. "Valerie," I said, "I'm taking 2 weeks off. Let the team know." "Sure thing, Leonard. Everything okay?" I paused, then chuckled lightly. "Better than it's been in years." I packed light, just a duffel, fishing gear, and a few of Dad's old flannels I hadn't worn in ages. I locked up the new house, climbed into my truck, and hit the road heading north. The farther I got from the city, the lighter I felt. No texts, no calls, no responsibilities, just winding roads, pine trees, and the long stretch of highway that led to the old family cabin. The cabin sat by a still lake just past Brainerd, Minnesota. My dad built it when I was a kid, and for years it had been our escape. No TV, no internet, just water, woods, and the occasional visit from a nosy raccoon. I pulled into the gravel driveway and shut off the engine. The air smelled like pine needles and damp earth. The wooden porch creaked under my boots as I stepped up and unlocked the door. Everything was as I remembered. The old rocking chair by the window, the wood-burning stove, the slightly uneven table where we used to play cards for hours. I lit a fire, unpacked my things, and opened a bottle of bourbon. That night, I sat on the porch under a sky so dark it looked painted. The stars felt closer here, brighter, and for the first time in a long time, my thoughts weren't racing. They simply existed, like the waves lapping against the shore. I didn't miss Dana. I didn't hate her either. What I felt was detachment. The kind of distance you only gain when the storm finally passes and you realize how long you've been standing in the rain. The days blurred together in the best way. I fished in the mornings, grilled in the evenings, read in the afternoons. Sometimes I'd chop firewood just for the rhythm of it. I wasn't trying to escape anything anymore. I was just living. One afternoon, I opened an old journal I'd kept during my early years as a forensic accountant. Notes, case ideas, names, timelines, all written in sharp, efficient script. And then I found a list at the back. Not a case, not a work document, a life list. It had things like, take a solo road trip, check, open my own firm, check, travel to Japan, not yet. Buy a boat, nope. Build something with my own hands, in progress. Learn to cook something besides. Chili, still pending. It made me laugh. Not because the goals were silly, but because I'd forgotten I'd written them at all. Somewhere along the way, I'd shifted from living to managing. Managing people, managing money, managing emotions. Even managing Dana's mood swings and ambitions like they were just another client's mess to fix. And the craziest part, I was good at it. I'd built an entire life around control. But sitting there with that old list and a fishing pole leaning against the porch rail, I realized something. The most important things couldn't be managed. They had to be chosen. A week into the trip, I got a voicemail from Valerie. "Hey Leonard, hope you're enjoying the time off. No emergencies, just wanted to let you know a few clients asked if you'd be open to teaching or consulting. Nothing demanding, just occasional work. Think about it. Also, Jason stopped by the office. Left a box for you." Jason, of course. He did. I called him that evening. "You left something at the office?" "Yep," he said. "Thought you might want it." "What is it?" "Something Dad would have wanted you to have. Figured you'd open it when you're ready." I picked it up on my way back into town a few days later. It was a plain, beat-up shoebox. No label. No note. Inside was a small stack of letters. Old ones, written in my dad's handwriting. The top one was addressed to me. "Leonard, open this when life feels heavy." So I did. The letter was simple. Honest, my dad had never been one for long-winded speeches, but he wrote about resilience. About how life wasn't always about climbing, it was often about recovering. Sometimes the measure of a man isn't what he builds, but what he rebuilds after something breaks. That line stuck with me, because he wasn't just talking about buildings, he was talking about people. He was talking about me. Back in Des Moines, I returned to a home that finally felt like mine. The house was still a little too quiet, still smelled faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt clean, a blank canvas. I spent the next week finishing the kitchen cabinets, painting the study, and building a bookshelf with my own hands. It wasn't perfect, one shelf leaned slightly, but it was solid. Real. Valerie stopped by one afternoon to drop off a few client folders and check in. "You look good," she said. "I feel good. You're really not going back to the old house?" "Nope, let her have it. Too many ghosts in those walls." She nodded. "You know, most people would have gone scorched earth." I smiled. I thought about it. "Why didn't you?" "Because revenge might feel good in the short term, but peace lasts longer." One evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Dana, sitting in what looked like a borrowed apartment. Tray nowhere in sight, no filters, no inspirational quote, just her. Alone, no caption, no message. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. I had nothing left to say. And for the first time in years, that felt like a gift. 3 weeks passed without incident. No more texts, no calls, no legal surprises, just the steady rhythm of rebuilding. Inside and out, I'd taken to walking the neighborhood every evening. Nothing fancy, just 10 quiet blocks of tree-lined sidewalks, and porch lights flickering on at dusk. I'd nod at the older couple walking their golden retriever, say hi to the kids playing basketball near the corner, wave at the guy who always grilled, shirtless, no matter the temperature. I liked the stillness. It was a kind of invisible healing. One night, I found myself stopping at the little used bookstore 2 blocks down. I hadn't noticed it before. A narrow space crammed with forgotten paperbacks, handwritten price tags, and a little bell that jingled when I stepped in. An older man behind the counter looked up from a chess game. He was playing against himself. "Looking for anything in particular?" "Nope," I said. "Just something that doesn't have a phone screen." He smiled. "We've got shelves of those." I ended up leaving with a copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The irony didn't hit me until later. but something about it felt right. That weekend, I invited Jason over for dinner. He showed up with beer and a smug grin. "You know," he said, "I liked you better when you were the serious older brother who didn't have time for nonsense." Yeah, I handed him a plate. "Well, now I make smoked brisket and I read philosophy, get over it," he laughed. "Honestly, you look lighter, like someone took a backpack of bricks off your shoulders." I nodded. Maybe someone did. We ate on the back porch, quiet, comfortable, family, and then, because I couldn't resist, I asked, "You ever think about settling down?" Jason snorted. "You mean tie myself to someone who thinks my job is just computer stuff?" Thanks, I learn from other people's mistakes." "Good," I said. "Then I've served a purpose." We clinked glasses and watched the sun go down. On Monday, I returned to the office. I wasn't back full-time, just a few days a week to ease in, but it felt good to walk into a space that was mine again. A place I'd built from nothing but a desk and a stubborn belief that numbers told stories no one else could see. Valerie had set aside a stack of folders on my desk. New clients, a few past ones checking in, and one envelope. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a bank letterhead. A notice confirming the repossession of all equipment from Harmon Fitness LLC, and handwritten at the bottom. Thought, "You should know, no signature. No explanation, just closure." I placed the paper in the shredder and moved on. That week, I got a call from a law professor at the University of Iowa. They were looking for a guest speaker on financial ethics. In forensic accounting, one of my former clients had recommended me. "We're not looking for a polished academic," she said. "We want someone who's been in the trenches. Real-world examples. Lessons you can't find in textbooks." I said yes before I even thought about it that night. I pulled up a blank document on my laptop and typed the title, "What We Miss When We Don't Look Closely." Preparing that lecture forced me to reflect, not just on the numbers, the audits, the clean spreadsheets, but on the emotional currency hidden in every financial decision. People think money is just math, but it's not. Money is trust. It's values. It's how people show you without saying a word what they care about most. Dotter cared about appearance. Trey cared about validation. And I had cared about peace. I'd just gone about it the wrong way, by avoiding conflict instead of facing it head-on. But I'd learned, and now, maybe, I could help others learn too. The day of the lecture, I stood in front of a packed classroom, mostly juniors and seniors, eyes half-glazed until I opened with this. I once received a text at 11:42 p.m. that ended my 15-year marriage and emptied my joint savings account. They sat up straighter. Today, we're not going to talk about balance sheets or audit trails. We're going to talk about what people hide and how they do it. I told them about Dana, about Trey, about trust funds, co-signed loans, the silent warning signs that hide in plain sight. I didn't name names. I didn't get personal, but I didn't need to by the end. Hands were flying in the air. Questions, thoughts, curiosity. I stayed behind after the lecture, answering every single one. As I packed up, the professor approached me. "You ever consider teaching full-time?" she asked. I smiled. I never even considered speaking out loud. "Well," she said, "you're good at it. Think about it." I said I would, and I meant it. That night, I drove back through the quiet streets of Des Moines, past the old condo I used to share with Dana. The windows were dark. The flower pots were empty. Someone else lived there now. Or maybe no one did. It didn't matter. I didn't feel a thing. No resentment, no regret, just a quiet, profound sense of distance. The past was finally, past. Back home, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. I pulled out my old life list. Again, the one from years ago. I added a new item. Start over and mean it. In progress, and then I added one more. Teach someone else how to protect what matters. TBD. 2 months had passed since the mediation. The dust had settled. The papers were signed. The accounts were frozen, audited, and restructured. Dana had relocated. Trey had vanished from public view. And I was still here, still standing. The funny thing about starting over is how quietly it happens. There's no applause, no sudden light bulb moment. Just a gradual softening. A loosening of something you didn't realize was clenched so tight for so long. I spent mornings reading on the porch, afternoons walking to the bookstore, or volunteering at a financial literacy non-profit. Evenings tinkering with the old Ford pickup in my driveway. It didn't run yet, but I liked the idea of restoring something that had been left behind. Maybe I saw a little of myself in that rusted hood. One Thursday morning, Valerie called. "Hey, remember that client from the McAllister audit?" "Vaguely well. He just referred you to a friend. Big tech guy out in Chicago. Apparently he needs someone to quietly trace a money trail for an acquisition deal." I paused. That used to excite me. High-profile work, complex audits, international layers. But now I just felt distant from it. "Tell him I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not taking on new clients right now." Valerie was quiet for a second. "You okay, Leonard?" "I'm good," I said honestly. "Just doing things differently now." That afternoon, I sat in the garage, staring at the pickup's engine bay. I wasn't really working on it, just thinking, letting the silence wrap around me. That's when I heard the knock. 3 short raps on the garage frame. Jason. He held up 2 coffees. Peace offering, in case I'm interrupting something important like avoiding work. I laughed. "Come in." I was just losing an argument with a carburetor. We sat on old lawn chairs, sipping coffee and watching a squirrel chew through a piece of insulation. Jason tilted his head. "You know, I never asked you miss her." It wasn't an ambush question. He said it like a brother would. No judgment, just curiosity. I thought about it. "I don't miss her," I said finally. "But I miss the version of myself who believed she loved me." Jason nodded slowly. "That version of you wasn't wrong. Just incomplete." We sat in the garage a little longer. No need to fill the silence. Sometimes brothers just sit. That weekend, I went fishing. I hadn't been back to the Minnesota cabin since Dad passed. But the lake was still the same. Quiet, still, cold as hell in the mornings. I stood at the dock, with a thermos of coffee, watching the mist roll over the water. The cabin had no internet, no TV, just a fireplace, a stack of old hunting magazines, and the echoes of my father's voice telling me to stop scaring the damn fish. I fished in the mornings, napped in the afternoons, and read in the evenings. For the first time in years, no one was asking me for anything. I didn't have to explain myself, defend my decisions, or carry someone else's expectations. And somewhere between the second trout and the last sip of bourbon, I realized something. I liked my own company again. When I returned to Des Moines, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in careful, looping script. "Leonard, you probably don't want to hear from me. And you don't have to respond. I'm writing because I owe you more than silence. You were a good husband. I was a selfish wife. I thought I wanted more. I thought I deserved more, and I convinced myself you wouldn't notice if I quietly took it. But you noticed everything. You just didn't say anything. That might be what breaks my heart the most. You didn't deserve what I did to you, and I'll carry that guilt for a long time, but I hope someday you'll remember that I wasn't always cruel. There were real moments between us. I know there were. I've started over. I'm working again. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally see what I lost. Dana, I read it once, then again, and then I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Not because I planned to revisit it, but because some endings deserve to be acknowledged, even when you've moved on. Later that week, I got an email from the University of Iowa. They wanted to offer me a part-time adjunct position, just one class per semester, plus a few guest lectures, financial forensics and ethics, a niche within a niche, but exactly the kind of thing that could change a student's perspective. Accepted. Teaching wasn't just about information. It was about making sure the next generation didn't fall asleep at the wheel the way I once had. The first class was small, just 12 students. I started the session with a story not about Dana or Trey, but about a client who had lost everything because he trusted a friend to handle the numbers. By the end of the story, everyone was taking notes. I pointed to the board and wrote, "Trust does not equal ignorance." Then I added, "Silence does not equal peace." One student raised her hand. So, how do you know who to trust? I smiled. You don't. Not completely. But if you build a life with someone, make sure they respect the details of what keeps that life running. That night, I walked through my quiet house, turning off lights one by one. No pictures of me and Dana on the walls anymore. Just old black and white shots of my parents. A framed blueprint of the cabin. A newspaper clipping from when I opened my practice. My life. As it was, uncomplicated, intentional. Real. I stood by the window, looking out at the street, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything to change. It already had. A few months later, I received an invitation. Not an email. Not a text. A real invitation, ivory cardstock, cursive font. The kind that makes you pause before opening. It was for a wedding. Trey Harmon and his new partner, not Dana. Apparently, that didn't last. I placed the card on my desk and stared at it for a while. Then, I tossed it in the shredder without a second thought. Closure doesn't always come with a bout, just arrives one day, in silence, and asks for nothing in return. The new version of my life wasn't flashy, but it was honest. I taught at the university twice a week. I volunteered as a financial advisor for small business owners in underserved neighborhoods. I fixed up the old truck. I joined a local book club. And every Saturday, Jason and I tackled another home project like two men pretending we didn't need YouTube tutorials every 10 minutes, that there was a rhythm to things. A sense of calm I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years. One afternoon, a student lingered after class. Her name was Sophia. Sharp, curious, probably one of the best in the cohort. "Professor Kessler," she asked, "can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "You always talk about financial protections, setting up structures, safeguarding assets. But have you ever had to use them?" I looked at her. "Yes," I said plainly. "I created every safeguard for someone I trusted, and I ended up needing every one of them." Her eyes widened slightly. "What happened?" "Someone made decisions with my life that weren't theirs to make. But I was ready. And that made all the difference." She nodded slowly. "Thank you." As she left, I realized I wasn't just teaching numbers and legal structures, I was teaching people how to protect their lives when love, loyalty, or illusion failed them. That mattered. That evening, I walked to the river. The sun was low, casting gold over the water. A boy was teaching his little sister to skip stones. An older couple walked their dog. Life, simple and untangled. I pulled out my phone. There were messages from old colleagues. A couple from Valerie. One from a woman I'd met at the library event, a lawyer who taught contracts and had a sarcastic sense of humor. We'd talked about tax loopholes and the best bourbon under $50. She made me laugh. That was new, I replied. Let's grab that coffee, maybe more. People ask if I regret anything. Would I go back and undo the marriage? Avoid the heartbreak? Protect myself sooner? No, because regret, like revenge, only works if you live backward. I don't. Everything that happened, every ignored red flag, every cold night spent pretending it was normal, every smile that cost me something inside was part of the same equation. You don't become whole by removing the pain. You become whole by integrating it. I was a forensic accountant, but now I was also a man who had been broken and rebuilt. Stronger, quieter, more precise, a year after the divorce. I visited my father's grave. Jason came with me. We stood in the winter wind, hands in our coat pockets. Think he'd be proud? I asked. Jason nodded. Yeah, especially the way you handled it all. I looked down at the stone. Sorry it took me so long to listen, Dad. Jason patted my shoulder. You listened when it counted. We left a bottle of Dad's favorite whiskey beside the grave. Old tradition, quiet tribute. Life didn't explode into something cinematic. It unfolded piece by piece. A call from an old friend. A student's thank you email. A home-cooked dinner with no noise but the crackle of vinyl records. A growing sense that peace wasn't something to find, it was something to allow. And one day, I caught myself humming while cleaning the kitchen. That was the real sign. I hadn't realized how long it had been since music lived inside me. A few weeks later, I received a thick envelope at the university. From the district attorney's office. They were finalizing the fraud investigation. Trey Harmon had declared bankruptcy. Dana had cooperated, avoiding prison, but faced a heavy fine. The banks had reclaimed their assets. The system, slowly and painfully, had done what it was supposed to do. I closed the file, no joy, no anger, just finality. That night, I had dinner with someone new, not a date, exactly. Just ... possibility. We talked about literature, the absurdity of property tax, and what it meant to start over in your 50s. She asked me, mid-conversation, do you still believe in love? I smiled. I believe in people, even after everything, especially after everything. She looked at me for a long moment, then raised her glass to everything. We clinked glasses, and somewhere between the laughter and the shared desert, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living.